My name is Liam. I'm 32 years old, and for my entire life, I thought making my parents proud was the most important thing in the world. So when they stood up at my engagement party and publicly mocked my fiancée Chloe in front of all our guests, my world shattered. They called her plain mocked her humble job as a librarian and implied she was trapping me. But what they didn't know was that my quiet, unassuming fiancé was about to reveal a secret about her family's $12 million estate that would leave them speechless. If you've ever had to stand up to your own family to protect the one you love, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. And before I tell you how this disastrous night unfolded, hit that like and subscribe button for more real-life stories about family love and the moment truth finally comes to light. Growing up in my family was like living in a constant, unspoken competition that I was always losing. My parents, Richard and Eleanor, were obsessed with appearances. They lived in a pristine suburban house with a manicured lawn and 2 luxury cars in the driveway. Their entire world revolved around status, which country club to join, which charity galas to attend, and, most importantly, how successful their children were. And by that, they really meant how successful my younger brother Mark was. Mark was the golden child. He followed the path my parents laid out for him perfectly. He went to law school, graduated with honors, and immediately joined a prestigious firm in the city. He married a woman they adored, a cardiologist named Isabel, and they lived in a high-rise condo that my parents bragged about to anyone who would listen. I love my brother, but our lives couldn't be more different. I never wanted to be a lawyer or a doctor. My passion was working with my hands. From a young age, I loved the smell of sawdust, the feel of wood grain, the satisfaction of turning a raw piece of timber into something beautiful and functional. I became a carpenter and eventually started my own small custom furniture business. I was good at it. I was happy. But for my parents, it was a source of constant, quiet disappointment. A carpenter, my mother would say at dinner parties, her voice dripping with forced sweetness. Yes, Liam is so artistic. He makes such lovely little tables. They saw my calloused hands not as a sign of hard work, but as a symbol of my failure to live up to their expectations. The financial double standard was glaring. When Mark needed a down payment for his condo, my parents wrote him a check for $100,000 without blinking. When my work van broke down and I needed $5,000 for repairs to keep my business running, my father gave me a lecture on financial prudence and offered to co-sign a loan which I would have to pay back with interest. I ended up working double shifts for 3 months to pay for it myself. I never said anything. I just accepted it as the way things were. I was the fixer, the reliable one who never asked for much. I'd be the one to drive 2 hours in the middle of the night to fix their leaky faucet or build them custom bookshelves for their study projects they'd then show off to their friends without ever mentioning I was the one who built them. Then 2 years ago, I met Chloe. I was installing a custom library in a client's home, and she was the head librarian they'd hired to curate their collection. She was quiet, intelligent, and had a smile that could light up a dusty room. We started talking about books, then about life. She didn't care that I was a carpenter. In fact, she loved it. She admired the passion I had for my craft. For the first time, I felt seen for who I was, not for who someone thought I should be. Chloe was everything my parents were not. She was humble, valued experiences over possessions, and found joy in simple things: a walk in the park, a good book, a home-cooked meal. She worked as a librarian at a public library in a modest part of town, and she was passionate about community literacy programs. She told me she came from a simple, middle-class family, and that her parents were quiet people who preferred a private life. I never questioned it. Her kindness and character were all that mattered to me. When I first introduced her to my parents, the meeting was predictably tense. My mother sized up Chloe's simple, elegant dress and asked, "Oh, is that from a local boutique?" The question was designed to categorize her, to place her on their social ladder. Throughout dinner, they peppered her with questions about her job. "A librarian? How quaint," my father remarked. "Is there much of a future in that with the internet?" and all Chloe handled their condescension with a grace I could only admire, answering their questions politely while steering the conversation to less judgmental topics. After she left, my mother gave me her verdict. "She's a sweet girl, Liam, but she's very plain. Are you sure you're not settling? You could do so much better." It was a knife to the heart. Better to them meant wealthier, more prestigious. It had nothing to do with character or happiness. Despite their disapproval, Chloe and I fell deeper in love. A year later, under a willow tree in our favorite park, I asked her to marry me. She said yes, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of profound, unshakable joy. I was building a life on my own terms with a woman I adored. I naively thought that our engagement would finally be enough to make my parents accept her. I couldn't have been more wrong. The engagement party was supposed to be our chance to celebrate with everyone we loved, but I had no idea my parents saw it as their final stage to voice their disapproval and break us apart. The engagement party itself, my parents insisted on hosting it at their home. "We need to make a good impression," my mother had said, a statement that I now understand was less about celebrating us and more about controlling the narrative. I wanted a simple backyard barbecue, a relaxed gathering with friends and family. They wanted a catered affair with linen tablecloths, a string quartet, and a guest list filled with their business associates and country club friends. As always, I relented, telling myself it was easier to keep the peace. Chloe was nervous in the week leading up to it. "What if they don't like my dress? What if I say the wrong thing?" she asked one night. Her dress was a beautiful understated lavender gown that she'd bought from a small, independent designer. It was elegant and timeless, just like her. "You'll be perfect," I assured her, kissing her forehead. "Just be yourself. That's all that matters." When we arrived at my parents' house, the performance had already begun. My mother, dressed in a designer gown that likely cost more than my monthly income, greeted us at the door. She kissed my cheek but gave Chloe a critical once-over, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Oh, Chloe, dear. That's a charming color on you," she said before turning away to greet a wealthier-looking couple behind us. The first cut of the night. The house was packed. I recognized maybe a third of the guests as our actual family and friends. The rest were strangers to me, my father's law partners, my mother's charity committee members. It felt less like our party and more like a networking event for them. I tried to steer Chloe toward my Aunt Carol, my father's sister, and the only member of my family who had ever truly supported my career choice. But my parents kept intercepting us, parading us around like show ponies. With each introduction, the script was the same. "This is our son Liam," my father would boom, clapping me on the back. "And this is his fiancée, Chloe." The slight pause before her name was a deliberate, calculated insult. Then came the inevitable question from the guest. "And what do you do, Chloe?" When she'd reply, "I'm a librarian," I could see the polite, dismissive smiles. In their world, a librarian was barely a step above a volunteer. They'd quickly change the subject to my brother Mark's latest legal victory or his wife's medical research. Chloe, to her credit, was a pillar of strength. She smiled, engaged in conversation, and never let their snobbery crack her composure. But I could see the toll it was taking. I'd catch her taking a deep breath when she thought no one was looking, or her hand would find mine under the table, squeezing it for reassurance. I felt a hot, simmering anger building in my chest. This was supposed to be our night, a celebration of our love. Instead, it had become a public trial of Chloe's worthiness. I just wanted the night to be over, but I knew the worst was yet to come. My mother had informed me that she and my father would be giving a toast. I could only imagine what they planned to say. The evening wore on a slow-motion disaster, playing out under the glow of crystal chandeliers. The microaggressions piled up, each one a small, sharp jab at Chloe. My mother made a point of discussing an upcoming trip to Europe with Mark, and Isabel pointedly asking them for travel tips in front of Chloe, knowing full well that a librarian's salary wouldn't allow for such extravagant vacations. When a guest asked about our wedding plans, my father interjected with a laugh. "We're just hoping they keep the budget reasonable. Not all of us have a doctor in the family." Every comment was a comparison, every conversation a reminder that, in their eyes, Chloe and I were the lesser couple. I tried to run interference, pulling Chloe away to talk to my cousins, or suggesting we go get some fresh air in the garden. But my parents were relentless. At one point, I overheard my mother talking to a group of her friends, her voice carrying across the room. "She's a sweet enough girl, I suppose," she said, gesturing vaguely in Chloe's direction. "But I always imagined Liam with someone more polished, someone with ambition. It's a shame, really. He had so much potential." The words hit me like a physical blow. She wasn't just insulting my fiancé. She was insulting my entire life, my choices, my happiness. The atmosphere grew thicker with unspoken tension. My brother Mark, usually oblivious, even seemed to notice. He came over to me while I was getting a drink, a concerned look on his face. "Are you and Chloe okay? Mom seems to be in rare form tonight." "We're fine," I lied, not wanting to put him in the middle. "She's just being Mom." But we weren't fine. I could see Chloe's smile becoming more and more strained. She was trying so hard for me, and I loved her for it, but I also hated that I had put her in this position. Finally, my Aunt Carol pulled me aside near the grand staircase. She was a kind, no-nonsense woman who had left a corporate job to become a landscape artist, so she understood my parents' brand of disapproval all too well. She held my hand, her eyes full of genuine concern. "Liam, this is awful," she whispered. "What they're doing to that poor girl is cruel. She's handling it with more grace than any of them deserve, but you can't let this continue. This isn't just about tonight. This is about the rest of your life. Are you going to let them treat your wife this way?" Her words struck a chord deep inside me. She was right. This wasn't just one bad night. It was a pattern, a lifetime of being told I wasn't good enough, and now they were projecting that same judgment onto the woman I loved. Hearing someone else validate my feelings, confirming that I wasn't just being oversensitive as my parents always claimed, was the final push I needed. I realized I had been trying to keep the peace for so long that I had forgotten how to fight for my own happiness. I went to find Chloe, ready to tell her we were leaving. I didn't care what anyone thought. Her well-being was more important than their party. I found her standing alone by a window looking out into the darkened garden. She looked so small and vulnerable in that moment. "Chloe," I started, my voice soft. "Let's go, we don't have to stay here." She turned, and I was surprised to see not tears but a look of calm, quiet resolve in her eyes. "No," she said, her voice steady. "Not yet. Your mother is about to give her toast. I think we should hear what she has to say." There was something in her tone that stopped me. It wasn't the voice of a victim. It was the voice of someone who knew something I didn't. Before I could ask, I heard the clinking of a glass against a microphone. My father was standing on the small makeshift stage, a smug smile on his face. "If I could have everyone's attention, please. My wife Eleanor would like to say a few words." The room fell silent. My stomach twisted into a knot. The final act was about to begin, and I felt a dreadful certainty that this was the moment everything would break. My mother glided onto the stage, taking the microphone from my father. She looked out at the sea of faces, her expression a perfect blend of maternal warmth and regal authority. It was a performance she had perfected over years of charity functions and social gatherings. "Thank you all for coming tonight to celebrate our son Liam," she began, her voice smooth as silk. "As a mother, all you want is for your children to be happy and secure. We have been so blessed with our son Mark, who has found incredible success in his career and in his marriage to the brilliant Dr. Isabel." She paused, letting the comparison hang in the air. The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. And now she continued, turning her gaze toward me. "Our Liam has found someone as well." She smiled, but it was a smile filled with pity. "Liam has always had a big heart. He's a simple man with simple tastes. He finds joy in his craft." The way she said craft made it sound like a childish hobby. "And he has found a girl who seems to fit his world perfectly." She then turned her focus directly to Chloe, who stood beside me, her back ramrod straight. "Chloe," my mother said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Welcome to the family. We are happy to have you. We know you come from a very different background and that this world must seem a little overwhelming." My fists clenched at my sides. I could feel the blood pounding in my ears. This wasn't a toast. It was a public execution by 1,000 cuts. But she wasn't finished. This was the final fatal blow. "We admire your ambition, dear," she said, a cruel glint in her eyes. "It's not every day a girl from a simple background manages to find herself a man from a good family. We just want you to know that while Liam might not have the financial success of his brother, we will always ensure he is taken care of." And by extension, she added her voice, dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that the microphone amplified throughout the silent room. "We will ensure you are comfortable. After all, that's what families do. We take care of the less fortunate." The implication was disgustingly clear. She was calling Chloe a gold digger. In front of our friends, our family, and 100 of her own pretentious associates, my mother had just branded the woman I loved as a charity case who had successfully trapped her underachieving son. The silence that followed was deafening. I saw my Aunt Carol's face pale with shock. I saw my brother Mark shift uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. And I saw the looks of pity and smug satisfaction on the faces of my parents' friends. That was it. The last straw. Something inside me snapped. The years of swallowing my pride, of accepting their judgment, of trying to be the good son, it all evaporated in that single humiliating moment. My only thought was of Chloe, of the pain and shame she must be feeling. I turned to her, ready to grab her hand and walk out of that house forever. But when I looked at her face, I didn't see shame. I didn't see tears. I saw a calm, almost serene clarity. She gave my hand a gentle squeeze, a silent message that said, "I've got this." Then, before I or anyone else could react, she gracefully detached her hand from mine and walked toward the stage. The room held its collective breath. My mother, still holding the microphone, looked down at her with a surprised, triumphant smirk, as if she were expecting an apology or a tearful retreat. She had no idea she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Chloe reached the stage and stood before my mother, her posture radiating a quiet confidence that was utterly at odds with the scene that had just unfolded. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like she was in command. "May I?" she asked, her voice clear and steady as she reached for the microphone. My mother, momentarily flustered by this unexpected move, handed it over without a word. Chloe turned to face the silent, watching crowd. She took a moment, her gaze sweeping across the room before finally settling on my parents. "Thank you, Eleanor," she began, her tone polite but firm. "Thank you for that welcome, and for your generous offer to ensure I am comfortable. You are right about a few things. I do come from a very different background than what you are accustomed to. And my world is indeed very different from this one." She paused, letting the words sink in. My parents exchanged a confused, smug glance, as if they thought she was about to thank them for their charity. "You see," Chloe continued, her voice gaining strength, "my full name is not just Chloe Davis. It's Chloe Annabelle Harrington Davis." A few faint gasps rippled through the part of the crowd that recognized the name. The Harringtons were old money, one of the founding families of the state, known for their quiet philanthropy and sprawling historic estates. They were notoriously private, almost reclusive, which is why their name wasn't immediately familiar to my parents, whose wealth was much newer and louder. My mother's smile faltered. "Harrington," she repeated, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Yes," Chloe confirmed. "You're right, Eleanor, that I am a librarian. I love my job. I believe in the power of public service and accessible knowledge. It's a value my parents instilled in me. They taught me that a person's worth is measured by their character and their contribution to the world, not by the size of their bank account." She turned her gaze back to my mother. You mentioned that Liam is a simple man. I disagree. He is a profoundly talented man. He is an artist who creates beauty and function from raw materials. He built a business with his own two hands, with integrity and hard work qualities that seemed to be in short supply in this room. A murmur went through the crowd. I stood frozen, my heart swelling with a mixture of pride and awe. "And now about my different background," Chloe said, her voice dropping slightly, drawing everyone in. "My family has always preferred a life of privacy away from the social climbing and materialism that can corrupt people. It's why I chose to live my life on my own terms, to build a career based on my passions, and to find a partner who would love me for who I am, not for what I have." She took a deep breath. This was it. The final reveal. My family's different background includes a property that has been in our name for over 200 years. It's a small place out in the countryside. You may have heard of it. It's called Stonegate Manor. The silence in the room was absolute. Even those who didn't know the Harrington name knew Stonegate Manor. It was a famous historical landmark, a sprawling 300-acre estate with a Georgian mansion that was occasionally featured in architectural magazines. Chloe let the name hang in the air for a moment before delivering the final devastating blow. "My parents passed away 3 years ago," she said, her voice softening with genuine emotion. "As their only child, I inherited the estate. I suppose your real estate agent could give you an accurate appraisal, but the last one valued the property and its assets at just over $12 million. She looked directly at my stunned parents. "So, thank you again for your concern, Eleanor. But I can assure you, I am quite comfortable. The secret was out. The weapon had been deployed. And it wasn't a document or a lawyer. It was the truth delivered with unshakable grace. The quiet librarian my parents had so carelessly mocked was by their own shallow standards infinitely wealthier and from a more distinguished lineage than they could ever dream of being." The aftermath of Chloe's revelation was a deafening, echoing silence. My mother's face had gone completely white, her mouth slightly agape. My father looked as if he'd been physically struck, his hand gripping the back of a chair for support. They were utterly, completely defeated, not by anger or shouting, but by quiet, irrefutable fact. Their entire value system had just been turned upside down and used against them. The guests were a whirlwind of whispers and sideways glances. Those who had been nodding along with my mother's condescending toast now looked horrified, desperately trying to distance themselves from the social wreckage. They were rats deserting a sinking ship. Chloe handed the microphone back to my speechless mother and walked off the stage with the same grace with which she had ascended it. She came straight to me, her eyes searching mine. I didn't hesitate. I wrapped my arms around her and held her tight right there in the middle of the room. "You are incredible," I whispered into her hair. That was when I found my voice. I let go of Chloe and walked onto the stage myself. I picked up the microphone my mother had abandoned. I wasn't angry anymore. I felt a cold, clear sense of purpose. I think I said, my voice ringing out with an authority my parents had never heard from me, that my fiancée has said everything that needs to be said about her. Now I'd like to say something about me. I looked at my parents, who were still frozen in a state of shock. For my entire life, I have tried to earn your approval. I accepted your disappointment when I chose a career I love. I accepted being treated as second best to my brother. I have fixed your plumbing, built your furniture, and listened to your endless criticisms, all in the hope that one day you would finally see me and be proud. I shook my head slowly, but tonight I realized that day will never come. Because you don't value character. You don't value hard work. You don't value love. You value money and status. And you were willing to publicly humiliate the kindest, most wonderful person I have ever known, simply because you thought she didn't have enough of either. I took a deep breath. Well, your judgment was wrong. On all counts. Not only is Chloe a person of immense character, but as you've just learned, she also happens to meet your own pathetic, shallow criteria for success. The irony is almost too perfect. My gaze hardened. This party is over. For us, at least. Chloe and I are leaving. To all our real friends and family who came here to celebrate with us tonight, we love you and we are so sorry you had to witness this. We will celebrate with you again properly at a time and place of our own choosing. Then I looked directly at my parents. As for you two, consider this your official notice. The wedding is still on, but you are no longer invited. You will not be a part of it. And you will not be a part of our lives until you understand the profound and disgusting nature of what you did here tonight. I put the microphone down on the stand with a definitive click. The sound echoed in the silent room. Without another word, I walked off the stage, took Chloe's hand, and we walked toward the front door. No one tried to stop us. As we passed my Aunt Carol, she gave me a small, proud smile and a nod. My brother Mark simply looked at the floor ashamed. We walked out of that house and didn't look back. As the heavy oak door closed behind us, I felt a weight I had been carrying my entire life lift from my shoulders. It was over. The performance, the competition, the endless struggle for approval, it was all over. We got into my work van, the same van my father had lectured me about, and drove away into the night, leaving the ruins of my parents' perfect, curated world behind us. The heavy oak door of my parents' house clicked shut behind us, and the sound seemed to sever a cord that had been tethered to me for 32 years. The sudden quiet of the cool night air was a stark contrast to the suffocating silence we had left inside. We walked to my work van, my humble, dented, sawdust-covered van, and it felt more like a chariot of freedom than any luxury car my father owned. The engine turned over with a familiar, comforting rumble. As I pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. I was done looking back. For the first 10, maybe 15 minutes of the drive, neither of us spoke. The city lights blurred into long streaks of gold and white as we drove a river of light carrying us away from the island of my past. My hands were still shaking slightly on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from the residual adrenaline of the confrontation. My mind was a chaotic replay of the last hour. The venom in my mother's voice, the sea of shocked faces, the incredible, unshakable poise of the woman sitting beside me, and the strange, unfamiliar sound of my own voice claiming its power. A part of me was still in disbelief. Had I really said those things? Had I really disinvited my own parents from my wedding? It felt both terrifying and profoundly exhilaratingly right. Finally breaking the silence, Chloe reached over and gently placed her hand on my arm. The simple touch grounded me. "Pull over here for a second," she said softly. I steered the van into a deserted parking spot overlooking a small city park. I cut the engine, and the silence returned, but this time it was peaceful. "Are you really okay?" she asked, her eyes, even in the dim light, searching mine with a depth of concern that made my heart ache with love for her. "I think so," I said, my voice sounding rough to my own ears. I took a deep breath, the first one that felt like it had reached the bottom of my lungs all night. I feel hollowed out, like something has been scraped clean. But it's a good feeling, a clean feeling. I turned to her, my own concerns now rushing to the surface. "But you, Chloe, I am so sorry. I brought you into this. I exposed you to their poison. I should have protected you better. I should have walked out the moment my mother started her toast." She shook her head, a faint smile playing on her lips. "Liam, look at me. You didn't expose me to anything I wasn't prepared for. I've known who they were from the first dinner. And you did protect me. You protected us. What you did back there, that was the bravest thing I have ever seen. You stood up to a lifetime of conditioning for me. For us." She paused, her smile fading into something more serious. "There's something I need to apologize for, though. I should have told you about my family long ago. The secret started for a good reason, but I kept it for too long. I was just so happy being Chloe the librarian with you. I loved that you fell in love with her and not with the Harrington name. I was afraid the money would change things, that it would become this third person in our relationship. It changes nothing, I said, my voice firm with conviction. Nothing about who we are. It doesn't change the fact that I love the way you laugh when you read a funny line in a book, or the way you thoughtfully listen when I talk about the complexities of different wood grains. It doesn't change a thing. I reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. But I have to admit, your timing was impeccable. You let my mother build her own gallows and then you calmly handed her the rope. A genuine, heartfelt laugh escaped her, a sound of pure relief that filled the small space of the van. I suppose I did, she admitted. When she started talking, I realized she was giving me the perfect stage. She wanted to define me, to put me in a little box labeled unworthy. I just decided to choose my own definition. It was in that moment, sitting in my dusty work van, that I felt the last vestiges of my parents' power over me crumble into dust. They had built their world on a foundation of money and status, and Chloe had just demonstrated with devastating elegance that they were amateurs playing in the little leagues. Instead of navigating back to our small shared apartment, which now felt tainted by its proximity to my old life, Chloe directed me toward the heart of the city. We pulled into the underground garage of a sleek glass tower that scraped the sky. A valet, unfazed by my paint-speckled van, parked between a Porsche and a Maserati, greeted Chloe by name. "Welcome back, miss. Harrington Davis. This is my city place," she explained as we rode a silent, private elevator upwards. I inherited it along with a manor. I mostly use it when the foundation has events or when I want a quiet weekend to write. I thought, we could use some quiet tonight. The elevator doors opened directly into her apartment, and I stepped out into a space that was the complete antithesis of my parents' home. Where their house was cluttered with heavy, ornate furniture and a suffocating sense of tradition, this was a masterpiece of minimalist design. The walls were glass, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of the city skyline glittering below. The furniture was simple, functional, and beautiful. I recognized a Scandinavian designer I admired. It was a space that felt open, calm, and full of light even in the dead of night. It felt like Chloe, and it felt like freedom. As soon as we were inside, my phone, which I had silenced for the party, began to vibrate violently on the marble countertop where I'd placed it. A relentless barrage of notifications. I picked it up. 3 missed calls from my father, 2 from my mother, and a string of texts. The first was from my mother. "You have humiliated this entire family. I expect an immediate apology for your and that woman's behavior." I read, it felt a familiar surge of guilt and anger, and then for the first time in my life, I simply deleted it without a second thought. It was like swatting away a fly. The next was from my father. "Your mother is hysterical. You need to call me right now and fix this. You've made a terrible mistake." I deleted it. Another from my mother, her tone shifting to manipulation. "I don't know what that girl has done to you, but you are not the son I raised. You are breaking your mother's heart." Delete. My phone rang again. It was my father. I looked at the screen at the word Dad, and my thumb hovered over the green button. The old instinct, the lifetime of conditioning to answer his summons, was strong. Chloe saw the conflict in my face. She walked over, took the phone from my hand, and pressed the red button. Then she powered it off completely. "No more tonight," she said gently. "Tonight is for us." Just as she said it, her own phone, sitting on a side table, lit up with a single text message notification. She picked it up and smiled. "It's from your Aunt Carol." She read it aloud. "Absolutely epic. So proud of you both. Call me when you're ready. The tyrants have been dethroned. Long live the Queen and her Carpenter King." We both burst out laughing. The support from the one family member who had always seen me for who I was felt like a balm on the raw wounds of the evening. It was a reminder that I wasn't severing all ties, only the toxic ones. The next morning, I woke up to the sun streaming through the vast windows, painting the city in the soft light of dawn. For a moment, I was disoriented. Then the events of the previous night came rushing back, not with anxiety, but with a profound and settled peace. Chloe was already awake, sitting in an armchair with a cup of tea, looking out at the view. "We need a new wedding plan," I said, my voice still rough with sleep. She turned and smiled. "I was just thinking the same thing." And just like that, we began to design our new life. It was empowering. We weren't reacting to my parents' demands anymore. We were creating something that was entirely our own. We sat at her minimalist dining table, a stark contrast to the heavy, imposing table of my childhood, and made calls. Chloe called the large, impersonal venue we had booked, and with a calm efficiency that I found incredibly attractive, canceled the reservation. I called the caterer, the florist, the band, explaining that our plans had changed. With each call, another tie to my parents' vision for my life was cut. Then I turned my phone back on and made one last call. I dialed my Aunt Carol. Well, if it isn't the revolutionary," she answered, her voice warm and full of laughter. "I haven't seen your parents that speechless since the club treasurer informed them their dues were late." I laughed, a genuine chest-deep laugh. "Was it really that bad after we left?" "Worse," she said with glee. "It was a mass exodus. People couldn't get out of there fast enough. Your parents just stood there completely stunned, like a couple of statues in a ruined temple. Liam, you did the right thing. It was a long time coming." "Thank you, Carol," I said, my voice thick with gratitude. "That means more than you know." I told her our new plan, a small wedding at the manor just for the people who truly mattered. Her delighted gasp was all the confirmation I needed. After hanging up, I looked at Chloe, who was already sketching out ideas for the ceremony on a notepad. We were in a stranger's penthouse, high above the city, our old life in tatters, and yet I had never felt more at home. The storm had passed, and in its wake it had cleared the air, washed away the debris, and left behind a clean, solid ground on which we could finally build. This was not an ending. This was day one. 7 months later, the world felt like it had been repainted in new, brighter colors. Our wedding day was the cornerstone of this new reality. We held it on a crisp Saturday in late autumn, under the sprawling canopy of a 200-year-old oak tree in the gardens of Stonegate Manor. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth and wood smoke from the fireplaces inside. We had only 50 guests, a carefully chosen circle of people who had shown us genuine love and support. Chloe was breathtaking. She wore a simple, vintage-inspired lace gown, and as she walked down the aisle of fallen leaves toward me, her smile was the only thing I could see. I thought about the night of the engagement party, the fear and anger I had felt, and I looked at her, this pillar of grace and strength, and I knew with a certainty that resonated in my very bones that we could face anything together. My Aunt Carol, her eyes shining, gave a reading from a book of poetry. Chloe loved. My best friends from my carpentry workshop, still dusty from the week's work, but beaming with pride, stood by my side. And my brother Mark was my best man. He had shown up alone, having had a long and difficult conversation with our parents. During his toast at our small reception held in the manor's grand library, he looked me directly in the eye, his voice thick with emotion. "I spent my whole life thinking I was the successful one, the one who had it all figured out," he said, raising his glass. "But watching my brother Liam tonight, I see what real success island. It's not about which law firm you're in or the size of your condo. It's about having the courage to be who you are, the integrity to work hard at something you love, and the wisdom to recognize a love like the one he shares with Chloe. I was a coward for not speaking up that night, and I'll regret that for a long time. But I am not too proud to say that my little brother is a better man than I am." To Liam and Chloe. The room erupted in applause, and as I hugged my brother, I felt a decades-old rift begin to mend, replaced by a new, more honest foundation. Life at the manor became our beautiful, chaotic normal. The grandeur of the place never fully faded, but we filled it with warmth and life. I converted one of the old carriage houses into a state-of-the-art workshop, a space larger than my old business premises. With a significant formally structured loan from Chloe, a decision we made together to solidify our partnership, I expanded my company, hiring a team of 4 other skilled artisans. We began to specialize in historical restoration, a niche I had always dreamed of. Our first major project was restoring the intricate woodwork in the city's oldest public library, a project Chloe had helped secure through the foundation. To work on wood that was centuries old, to bring beauty back to a public space for everyone to enjoy, gave me a sense of purpose that selling custom coffee tables never could. My calloused hands, once a source of shame for my parents, were now restoring history. Chloe, meanwhile, poured her heart into her dual roles. She continued working part-time at her local library, refusing to give up the community connection she cherished. But she also fully embraced her role as the director of the Harrington Foundation. She expanded its mission, creating mobile libraries that served rural communities and funding scholarships for aspiring librarians from low-income backgrounds. We were a team in every sense. In the evenings, we'd sit by the massive stone fireplace in the library, the same room we held our reception in, she with her grant proposals and me with my design sketches. We were building a shared life, a shared legacy, piece by piece. While our world was expanding, my parents was shrinking. The story of the engagement party had become a cautionary tale in their social circles. As Aunt Carol had relayed to me with a hint of satisfaction in her voice, the fallout was swift. In a world built on reputation, they had committed the ultimate sin. They had been publicly revealed as cruel and foolish. Their attempt to paint Chloe as a deceptive gold digger had backfired spectacularly. Instead, they became the snobs who had tried to humiliate a member of the Harrington family, a name that, while private, still carried immense weight. Friends stopped returning their calls. Invitations to galas and dinner parties dried up. They were quietly asked to step down from the boards of several charities, their presence now considered a liability. Their perfect manicured world had become a gilded cage, and they were trapped inside it alone with their regret. About 6 months after our wedding, a letter arrived. It was handwritten by my father on his formal stationery. It was a simple, desperate request for a meeting. Chloe and I discussed it at length. We knew we couldn't avoid it forever. For our own peace, we needed closure. We agreed, but on our terms. We chose a quiet, neutral restaurant halfway between the city and their suburb. When they walked in, I was struck by how much they had changed. They seemed smaller, their expensive clothes hanging on them like costumes. The arrogant confidence was gone, replaced by a fragile, nervous energy. My mother's eyes were puffy, and my father's shoulders were slumped in a way I'd never seen before. We sat in an awkward silence for a few moments before my mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. We just wanted to say, "We're sorry, Liam. We never meant to hurt you." It was a weak, self-serving start, focusing on their intent rather than their impact. I didn't let it slide. "Didn't you?" I asked calmly. "Because from where I was standing, it looked like you intended to hurt Chloe very much. You stood up in front of 100 people and called her a gold digger. You mocked my life's work. What part of that wasn't meant to cause hurt?" My father sighed, looking down at his hands. "We were wrong, son. We were arrogant. We saw everything through a lens of money and status. We thought we were protecting you from a bad match." That was when Chloe spoke, her voice devoid of anger, filled only with a quiet, powerful clarity. "With all due respect, Richard, you weren't protecting him. You were trying to control him. And you weren't judging my match. You were judging my perceived lack of wealth. I kept my background private for a reason. I wanted to find someone who would love me for my character, not my inheritance. Your reaction that night proved that my fears about people were entirely justified. The irony is that Liam, the man you considered a simple carpenter, never once asked about my financial situation. He fell in love with me, the librarian. He passed a test you didn't even know you were failing." Her words hung in the air, irrefutable. My mother began to cry, real tears this time, not of performance, but of what seemed like genuine remorse. "We've lost everything," she whispered. "Our friends, our standing. We lost our son." "You didn't lose me," I corrected her gently but firmly. "You pushed me away. And if you ever want to be a part of my life, of our life again, things have to change. Permanently. I leaned forward, laying out the new terms of our relationship as if it were a blueprint. First, you will speak to and about my wife with the utmost respect always. Her name is Chloe, and she is the best thing that has ever happened to me. Second, no more comparisons. Not to Mark, not to anyone. My life is my own, and I will not have it measured against your yardstick of success. Third, we will not discuss money or status. Our front door is open to you as family, not as a means to regain social standing. And finally, I said, my voice hardening slightly, you will apologize to Chloe. A real apology. Right now. My father looked at Chloe, his eyes filled with a shame I had never seen in him. Chloe, he said, his voice hoarse. I am truly sorry. What we did was inexcusable. You are a woman of immense grace and character, and we were blinded by our own prejudice. We would be honored to have you as a daughter-in-law if you'll have us. My mother nodded, tears streaming down her face. Please, Chloe, forgive us. It wasn't a magic fix. A lifetime of hurt couldn't be erased over a single dinner. But it was a start. A painful, humbling, necessary start. We left that restaurant not as a perfectly healed family, but as a broken one willing to start picking up the pieces. The power dynamic had shifted forever. They had to learn to love the son and daughter-in-law they had, not the ones they had manufactured in their minds. Our relationship would be rebuilt not on their terms of conditional approval, but on our terms of mutual respect. It was a fragile peace, but it was a peace nonetheless earned through a painful but liberating truth. It's been a year since our wedding, nearly 2 since that disastrous engagement party, and I often find myself walking through the gardens of Stonegate Manor in the late afternoon. The sun casts long shadows through the ancient trees, and the air smells of lavender and old stone. It's in these quiet moments sometimes, with the satisfying heft of a well-balanced chisel in my hand from working in my nearby workshop, that I truly understand the magnitude of what has changed. It's not just about the house, the money, or the new life Chloe and I are building. It's about the profound internal shift that occurred within me, a recalibration of my entire understanding of value, family, and self-worth. For 32 years, I lived inside a prison I didn't even know existed. It was a prison built of my parents' expectations, its bars forged from their narrow materialistic definition of success. In their world, value was something you could quantify, something you could hang on a wall or park in a driveway. A person's worth was directly tied to their job title, their income, the prestige of their name. They saw my life's passion, my craft as a novelty, a quaint hobby. They looked at a piece of custom furniture I spent weeks pouring my heart into and saw only its price tag, never its soul. They never understood the story told by the grain of the wood, the strength in a perfectly executed dovetail joint the character found in its imperfections. They only saw the surface, the polish, the veneer. And because I didn't fit their mold, I was perpetually deemed less valuable. For years, I accepted their valuation. I worked tirelessly to please them, to prove them wrong, but I was playing a game with rules designed for me to lose. The greatest, most painful lesson I learned is that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally are the very ones who place the most conditions on that love. And sometimes the cruelest act of betrayal can be an unintentional gift. My parents' public humiliation of Chloe was the most painful moment of my life, but it was also the most liberating. It was a scalpel, sharp and brutal, that cut away the disease I had carried for so long, the desperate, corroding need for their approval. In that moment of absolute clarity, standing on that stage, I wasn't just defending Chloe. I was reclaiming myself. I was finally declaring that their yardstick would no longer be used to measure my life. This journey has taught me the profound difference between the family you are born into and the family you choose. For so long, I believed blood was an unbreakable bond that demanded infinite patience and sacrifice. I contorted myself into shapes that were not my own to keep that bond from fraying, not realizing it was I who was breaking in the process. My chosen family showed me what a bond of love truly looks like. It looks like my Aunt Carol, who saw my passion and encouraged it, who stood in that room full of judgment and met my eyes with pride. It looks like my friends from the workshop men who understand the language of hard work and loyalty, who showed up to our wedding ready to celebrate the man they knew me to be, not the one my parents wished I was. And most of all, it looks like Chloe. The other day we were sitting in the manor's library, a fire crackling in the hearth, and I asked her, "Do you ever regret it, telling everyone your secret that night? Your life would have been so much simpler if you hadn't." She looked up from her book and smiled, that quiet, thoughtful smile of hers. "The secret was a weight, Liam," she said. "It was a shield I used to protect myself from people like your parents. But living behind a shield isn't really living. That night I didn't just tell them who I was, I decided who I wanted to be. Not the reclusive Harrington heiress, but just Chloe. A librarian who believes in the power of stories and who happens to have a very big, drafty house. A woman who fell in love with a carpenter, not for his potential in someone else's eyes, but for the strength and beauty he creates with his own hands. Her love didn't just accept me, it celebrated me. That is the bedrock of a true family. As for the family I was born into, the healing is a slow, ongoing process of restoration, much like the antique furniture I now work on. You can't just paint over the deep scratches and pretend they aren't there. You have to sand it down, acknowledge the damage, and carefully, painstakingly rebuild. Our relationship with my parents is not what it once was. It is something new. It is fragile, built on the careful, deliberate honesty we established in that restaurant. The old power dynamic is gone. They are learning to engage with me not as a disappointing son, but as a man with a life and a family of his own. They are learning to respect Chloe, not as an heiress, but as the formidable, kind woman who is my wife. There are still difficult moments, but the foundation is no longer built on their terms of conditional approval, but on our terms of mutual respect. It is difficult, but for the first time it is real. I've learned that a person's character is not revealed when life is easy, but when it is tested. My parents, faced with a choice between their prejudice and their son's happiness, chose prejudice. Chloe, faced with public humiliation, chose dignity and truth. And I, faced with a lifetime of quiet submission, finally chose to fight. The man I was before that night would have stood silently by, seething with resentment, but too afraid to make a scene. He would have apologized to Chloe, later trying to smooth things over. That man is gone. In his place is a husband who will protect his wife, a father-to-be who will teach his children that their worth is innate and unshakable, and a man who finally knows his own value. We talk about the future now, Chloe and I. We talk about continuing the legacy of her family, not through wealth, but through kindness and community service. We talk about the pitter-patter of tiny feet on these ancient, creaking floorboards, about raising children who will know that love is the greatest inheritance of all. We will teach them that the strongest structures are built with integrity, whether it's a bookshelf, a business, or a life. That is the legacy we will build together. Looking back, the biggest lesson I learned was this: you must define your own success. Do not ever hand the architect's pen of your life to someone who doesn't understand your blueprints. Your worth is not a stock to be traded on the market of public opinion or family approval. It is a deep, intrinsic truth. Find the people who see that truth in you and hold on to them. They are your real treasure. Have you ever had to choose between the family you were born into and the family you've chosen? What did you learn from that experience, and how did it shape the person you are today? I would love to hear your stories and insights in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt undervalued or had to fight for your own happiness, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to hear more real-life lessons that might change your perspective. Remember to share this video with someone who might need a reminder that their value is not up for debate. Thank you for listening, and may you always have the courage to build a life that is truly, authentically your own.